Hello and welcome. And as usual, every Thursday, we are dedicating our airtime to women empowerment. And today we are looking at women, conflict and peace. Now, women insist they are not the weaker sex, yet they claim special protection in times of conflict. To me, that's a paradox. Everybody is vulnerable to devastation that conflict causes. So why should women receive special attention? When I have disagreement with my siblings and my mother steps in, I honestly feel obligated to give reconciliation a genuine chance. Is it possible that women have special powers in peacemaking area as well? I am talking to Rosaline Obing-Ofori, the West Africa Program Manager for the Purdue Peace Project. Now, she has already taken me to task for not having enough female representation on this show, so I am sure she can go the full distance with me. My name is Nana Nsakwa, and this is PM Express. Don't move. Women, conflict and peace, and with me to discuss this issue or be educated about this issue. I prefer that. I don't prefer discussion. Educated about this issue is Rosaline Obing-Ofori, West Africa Program Manager for Purdue Peace Project. So therefore, this is well within her jurisdiction. Rosaline, you're welcome to my show.
Thank you very much. It's been longed for.
Long overdue, huh?
Yes.
Well, now that you've come once, you know, it's going to be many. And one of the things that we're going to talk about also is that the Women's Manifesto is 10 years old. And in the Women's Manifesto, page 54, it talks about women and conflict. My first question to Rosaline is, what conflict? Women are always at all-night prayers. They are always at church. You know, there's no conflict. Where is the conflict?
Thank you, Nana. In fact, the fact that you find a lot more women in the churches at night praying should tell us that there is something wrong. Because if you take a Christian or a religious community, everybody thinks that when you are in need, you go to the ultimate, that is God, for assistance. And so if more women are praying, it means more women are in difficulty, which also means that there is a conflict, because conflict can be domestic, it can be within an office, it can be national, it can be international. And so there are different levels of conflict. So even to start with, the fact that women are going to church and staying overnight for weeks and praying shows that maybe there's a domestic conflict. And precisely the fact that there's a domestic conflict, that can emanate and result into a more social and national conflict. So indeed, there is conflict. And women don't like conflict because it does affect them more differently, worse than it affects men, which I know we've been debating. You don't seem to think it does, because women say they are not a weaker sex. Yes, we are not weak, but there are issues that make us weak.
Are we saying that we should now find a separate law that would also protect men in conflict, or is your law good enough to cover all of us? I mean, we all suffer. I mean, if I get a bullet in my back, it's equally painful.
Yeah, you see, the reality is that if a woman is at peace, her husband will also be at peace. Her children will be at peace. And if children are at peace, then the society is also at peace. But if one man is not happy, of course, that's when they pull out a gun. And that pulling out of the gun can mean from the family level translating to the public level. And so there is actually a need to look at what conflict issues affect women and how it also affects men. Men may be forced to go to war and be amputated. They may lose their lives. They may get traumatized because of the blood you'll see after fighting and get mad. But women also have this. Women are taken for sex slaves in times of war. They are abducted. We have the Boko Haram girls that we still cannot find. And you can imagine what it is. Why is it that the boys were not abducted, but girls have been abducted?
Let me come back to the constitution. Is this referring to conflict as in, literally full-blown out war conflict, or even the usual, domestic conflict where, there's no peace at home, or let's say a widower is being driven out of the house because they have, is this covering all that, or this is specifically for, full-blown out war?
For the Women's Manifesto document, the chapter on conflict is more about the full-blown conflict, because we also have a chapter that deals with the domestic conflict, which is the domestic violence, the sexual abuses. All those are conflict issues. But in that particular chapter, we are looking at the full-blown conflict and how it impacts on women. And you find that when there's a conflict, normally, already culturally, women have to take care of the sick. They have to take care of the aged. And so when there's conflict and the old people are left at home, who takes care of them? It is the women. So now they can't even go out to do their usual business. They are the ones who have to stay at home and protect children. And so it affects their work, their income generating activities. They are the ones who are captured as sex slaves. They are raped. They become victims of war. And so statistics have shown, research has shown that a lot of women become HIV positive in conflict-prone areas because of the amount of rape that they have to go through. And so all these things impact on women more negatively. A man will not be raped by another man. A man will not be abducted. At worst, they'll kill you or amputate you. But a woman could be amputated and raped at the same time. And if she doesn't die, she has to bear all the brunt of the effects of that conflict.
But would you say Ghana is at war, or are we a war-torn country? Or
Thankfully to God, and fortunately, we are not yet at that level. But if you look at pockets of the regions in Ghana, yes, we have conflicts. But you see, it's like people think, oh, it hasn't reached me. There's war in Yendi, or conflict in Yendi. There's conflict in Branhafo. There's conflict in Volta region. It's not me. So if you put the totality of what is happening, I will not rule out the fact that Ghana is at conflict, because all that is happening in Yendi or Boko or Branhafo chieftaincy disputes, they eventually affect all of us. Look at the number of children who are on the streets. Since the 80s, 90s, there have been ethnic conflicts in the northern part of Ghana, and that explains why we have so many street children and Kayayes who are in Accra and Kumasi, because some of them had their homes burned down, parents were killed, and if the insecurity that your community is fighting another community, these youth have run away.
But we put that mainly to economics rather than conflict. We sort of associated them more to, illiteracy and economics, or not giving a fair opportunity to, carry on education, and therefore the troop down south. Would you associate that with conflict?
Yes, because if school buildings had not been demolished, if teachers had not been killed or run away, those children would have been in schools with teachers to teach them. But if you go to some communities, in fact, the Konkomba Nanumba conflict had villages wiped out. And even the Yendi conflict, I have been to places where you could not get one single man in a community, to the extent that women, by cultural belief, had to go and borrow young men to come and live with them, because they believe that every community must have a man as a head. And there were communities that didn't have any single man alive. And so if the children...
So then we should be writing a constitution, because here we are, the women were still in the village, we were gone, and the women are still asking for protection. So we should be asking for protection, because we were wiped out.
Yeah, you were wiped out because you wanted to take the gun against the advice of women. In fact, when you go into research on some of these conflict issues, you'll find that wives knew that their husbands were preparing for conflict. But because tradition stipulates or ordains that a woman should not even advise a man, and a man should not take the advice of a woman, the women just kept quiet, gossiped about it during their trips to fetch water or grind maize, or, you know, they'll be talking about how their husbands are cleaning their guns and the fact that they suspect something. But who are you as a woman to go and tell someone to advise your husband not to go to war? Who are you to even tell your husband that he shouldn't go to war because of the gender inequalities, even in decision making? Because a woman at home doesn't have the right to take decisions when the husband doesn't subscribe to it. And so even you can advise a husband against something, he will not take it because you're a woman. Who are you to advise me? And so it is a reality that most of the wars could have been prevented if women were involved, or women had equal status in decision making with their husbands. But because of the absence of that, the men do what they want, they go and they are killed, and we have to suffer the consequences. So you stay at home, there's no man, you now have to do all the male jobs as well as the female jobs. You have to protect yourself, protect the children, feed them, etc., etc. And so it's not about having, if there should be a constitution, then the constitution should simply say that no guns in Ghana, no conflict in Ghana. So whoever is caught trying to ignite a conflict should be dealt with. But we have people, and mostly men of power, whether political or economic or social powers. You have chiefs who are powerful and can order something to be done in a community. These are the people that if we had a constitution that I will call a gender-sensitive constitution, then we should be holding those men responsible for igniting conflict. So there I will agree with you. But if we are looking at women who, after conflict, they have been raped and don't even have money to go to hospitals, the state should have a mechanism of taking care of them.
The Constitution, Article 12 and 13, clearly states that everybody should be protected under the state. Mm-hmm. And the state gives, fair amount of protection. So I'm just trying to find out, should it go further to protect women more or protect women differently?
It is both more and differently. Mm-hmm. More because even what is happening, it's only a written document. Mm-hmm. The provision is not implemented. If it was, a husband wouldn't beat a wife, and you go to the police station to report, when we know that fighting is criminal. But when a man beats his wife and she reports, the policeman tells her, this is a family matter. Until we fought for the Domestic Violence Act, until then, a man could beat her wife even to death, and it will be considered a family issue. And families will sit together, mourn the dead woman. Even the parents of the lady would just mourn, and that ended it. So you see that when we now have the Domestic Violence Act, mm-hmm. it is now backing the Constitution, so at least women have protection in their marriages. But until that is done, women were dying. And I remember I was very much involved in the development of the Domestic Violence Act. And there were policemen when we were trying to disseminate information and get information. There was a lot of consultation. And one policeman said, the act is long overdue because a woman had been complaining to him all the time about her husband beating her. Sometimes she came with a broken tooth, a broken eye, and he thought, oh, but how does this concern me? One day they reported that they had found a woman butchered. And when he went, it was that very woman who had been complaining to her over the years. And he did nothing about it. Now the husband had killed her. And so when we were working on the act, he said, this is good because at least it gives me some powers to arrest this man and not consider his brutality as a family issue.
I mean, let me stay with the family issue. I mean, like you started by saying that, if I hit you, it's an offense. But the fact that I'm married to you just drops the offense. How are we treating it?
Yeah, before, because
Yes.
we inherited the penal code from our colonial masters who did not have the level of gender equality that we had. You know, the unfortunate thing is that Africans, because we depended on oral tradition, we didn't document a lot of things. But I'm telling you, in our traditional setup, the African was very, very, very gender sensitive, and gender equality was respected. For instance, why do we have the Queen Mother of the Akan tradition being the final decision maker when it comes to installment of a chief? That is one. Why is it that we have women who control the kitchen and men could not even enter the kitchen without the woman's approval? So it told you that while the man was powerful outside, the woman was equally powerful inside. So there was a kind of balance. And each one could take decisions and say, you do this, you don't do that. Our colonial masters' law was not like that, because they had a rule which saw women as inferior. But unfortunately for us, because they came to rule us for years and imprinted in us the fact that this is what we do, we saw their color, we copied it, it stayed. But if you go down to our tradition, again, you find that even leadership, today we are fighting for 30% representation of women in politics and decision making. The original African leadership was gender sensitive. There were women who were chiefs, and nobody else opposed it. So if in the line of inheritance, a woman was next, there was no question about her being a woman and passing the stool on to a son. She took it up. But it's because of these colonial masters and the rules that they left, which included their criminal codes, where, for instance, a husband could beat a wife, and that was considered a family affair. And that is why after a period of time, when they themselves sat down and realized that women were suffering too much under the dominance of men, they came up with the matrimony, the law on divorce. Said that if a woman leaves you, if she sues you or you leave her, you have to provide for her. So the matrimony in the Western world, where you get a lot of property, and a man could just walk out with what he's wearing. The woman keeps the house, the furniture, and everything, resulted from the realization that what they were doing to women was not fair. So maybe if we are not careful and we don't do things gender sensitively, we'll also get there and we'll walk men out empty-handed. But that is not what we want to see. We want to see the two living together in harmony, in peace, and in love.
I mean, would you say that system survived and came to stay with us today because men being men, well, it suits me, you know, if I can hit her and I won't get charged, then I'm by all means going to adopt this law. And that maybe if it was the reverse, would have thrown it away ages ago.
If men were not supported to uphold that practice, they would have thrown it away. But now that, for instance, structural adjustment programs, men have lost their jobs. Have you seen that women are getting more and more into public spheres? Because I've had access to education like a man, and I can be employed based on my qualifications, so I earn a living. So now, when you're even talking of gender equality, you find that in some cases, women are now even more gender biased and would be the ones to have the power to make decisions at home. Have you realized that when you have a very rich woman in a village, in a community, where most of the men don't have money, they don't have any highly educated man, that woman is adored? People consult her. It's a question of power. Who has the power? Politically, financially, socially. So when you have a woman who is powerful, her voice is heard. Is that not so?
Yes.
Her voice is heard. And so if we are able to create a situation where a woman equally calls the shots, by and by, these gender inequalities will come to cease.
It's a very tricky one where the scale, for this one to be gender equal, the scales have to tip in favor of women for we to call it equality. And therefore, that's not equality then, that's, cheating us.
It's not cheating, because even in our constitution, the constitution says that where there is an imbalance, unfortunately I can't quote it exactly, but I'm very sure about it, where there is an imbalance, the state should do something to create an egalitarian society. And so when we are talking about gender equality and gender equity or gender sensitivity, the 30% that we are asking for minimum in politics means that when we have reached 50-50, everything about affirmative action will drop. So what you are talking of now is an affirmative action to bridge the gap. But the moment the gap is bridged, nobody asks for anything different. But because our 1992 Constitution believes that every Ghanaian has equal rights, if somebody's right is not provided for, something should be done to ensure that the person enjoys the right.
Won't this be breaching the Constitution? I mean, the Constitution calls for equal rights for everyone. But, I mean, you are now wanting a bit more than equal.
What is the more than equal? How many women are in senior positions?
We are talking about, with regards to conflict resolution or caretaking after conflict. I mean, men are not saying that we also have to be babysitted after we've come back from war, but so...
Are the men babysitting in the first place? They are not babysitting. The women are doing the babysitting. They are the ones taking care of the amputees, cleaning them and feeding them and doing all the dirty jobs for them. Are men doing that? No. Because by tradition, women are caretakers in the home. And so when there's conflict, and all these amputated men and women and children, even including women, and you find that a woman who has one hand left will still have to provide for a man who has one hand left. She will still have to provide for those with two hands chopped off, 2 feet chopped off. She would have been raped and she will be struggling with health issues, HIV, AIDS, sexually transmitted diseases. She will still be going through the trauma. And so there's a compendium of suffering that the woman has to carry. The man is only carrying the fact that his hand is off and he's remembering the war. But even in remembering the war at night or sometime in the course of the day, he expects that woman to be able to talk to him nicely. But has he got that love to even sympathize with a woman with one hand who is fetching water from a well with one hand, carrying it with one hand, coming home to cook with one hand, and even perhaps sick at the same time? No, the man is not thinking that way. That's one aspect. You look at post-conflict mechanisms.
Hold on, I want to look at post-conflict mechanisms. I'm going to take a break, and then when I come back, we're looking at post-conflict mechanisms. Stage. Women, conflict and peace, and I'm talking to Rosalind Obeng-Ofori, who knows exactly. I mean, she's been there fighting for gender equality. What a good cause to fight. Post-war mechanisms. What are we talking about? Educate me.
Thank you, Nana. When you talk of post-war mechanisms, we are looking at people who have been displaced due to the conflict. How do you reintegrate them? What are the key issues? So you can have even sexual exploitation based on which eventually can lead to the HIV, AIDS, other STIs. What do we do with them? So the trauma that women have gone through. There's a case of a woman, this was in the Liberian War, where her 14-year-old girl was raped by 3 big men, and her husband was slit in front of her, and she was asked to watch them cut the husband's throat whilst they were raping her daughter. And this woman didn't die. She was just crazy, roaming about and singing the song they asked her to sing and clap and dance whilst all this was happening to her. And the woman was still going about with that song, and you could tell what she was going through. So what are the programs that will help such people to reintegrate, to get health, to get better?
Can you ever recover?
Some of them will. Some of them will recover. Others might just, depends on your, you know, what kind of systems are put in place for you, and how personally you are also minded about what you want to be. Some people will easily say, well, it's pass and go. I mean, everybody goes through funerals, for instance, but the level at which each one appreciates the difficulty is different. So these are some of the things we look at. And also let me say that in post-conflict, you still have peacekeepers who would go to keep peace so that the war is, I mean, the peace is sustained. And a lot of times, we don't realize how much harm these peacekeepers even do when they go. They are there without their spouses. They need their emotional, sexual satisfaction. Where do they get them? These are the people who are given food rations to distribute to the needy people, the refugees, the displaced people. Some of them turn around and sell these things to people. So even there is that aspect of corruption. And as they sell, it means even the needy ones do not have access to them. And who are they? Who are those who get access? It is the men who have a bit of money. They buy these things from the peacekeepers and go back to sell to the needy women when it should have been free. So at the end of the day, you find that even food for women and children who are displaced as a result of the conflict are even poorer and poorer. We have trafficking.
Yeah.
Sexual trafficking for sexual benefits, prostitution in other countries, because your whole family is wiped out. You found yourself alone in a refugee camp. The war is over. They say, go away. Somebody comes and says, oh, you know, I'll take you to Italy. So work on a passport, fake one, of course, for you. By the time you get there, you are told you have to survive. And you are going to do prostitution in order to survive. You've already reached there. They lock you up. I mean, some of the stories are horrendous. You are locked up in a house. A man just come in and take you. What do? You can't run away. You have no papers. These are some of the post-conflict issues.
See, I don't know, maybe some of these stories sound quite unbelievable.
Yeah.
I'm an adult. You know, clearly I can run away or I can say no or yes, but it does happen.
Yeah, they are unbelievable because you have a level of maturity and God-fearing in nature, so you would not even think of doing this. But there are people whose joy it is to exploit a situation to every benefit. Look, even in Ghana here, it can happen. And I remember when we were working on the Domestic Violence Act, I'm told that a group of politicians who were to look at the document, when they were consulted, and some colleagues were saying, yeah, this is good. One man turned and said, what is good? When I didn't have money to enjoy myself, and now that I'm going to be a politician, and I have all the girls to line up, you are telling me they should come up with a law which can easily put me behind bars? Do you understand? This is somebody who is a politician within our state, you know, and all he's thinking is how to use his political privileged position to enjoy himself emotionally at the expense of the girls. So you will not think that way, but somebody is looking for that opportunity. Again, post-conflict, even the peacekeepers who go, they are given allowances that are very huge comparatively to what the locals will earn in any job. And because the locals don't have, and you know, Africa, we are so disorganized, trade liberalization. If I choose to sell my watch at 100 Ghana cedis, and somebody is in need and will sell his for 10 cedis, I meet you and I know you can afford 100, you need it, I tell you it's 100. What am I doing to the economy? So even post-conflict programs should look at how the economy is affected. You send people, they earn all these big, big monies, enter the market, and the price is tripled, they buy it. You think tomorrow that woman will not sell her goods at the same price? She'll sell her banana or her apples at the same price because she needs more money. And as that goes on, the price becomes inflated. And so you have the economy affected. So there are so many things that go into conflict and post-conflict. And that is why there's a need to have a conscious effort to make sure that everybody is catered for. So what are some of the mechanisms? The DDR programs integrating...
Before we go to the programs, it all seems to come back to the door of women, because if it's the market and the prices are inflated, generally women would end up at the market to buy and then, you know, have the effect of even the peacekeeping.
It's not only women. There are men who are also selling.
Generally.
Yeah, but the things that the men will even buy will be things that are for men. Or even if you go to buy food. I know that this is a peacekeeper, he is earning dollars. In Liberia, you can go to the market with your US dollar or your Liberian dollar and buy things. Is that normal? That in a country which is not America, you can go with an American dollar and buy openly. It's not as if you've changed the dollars into Liberian dollars and you are shopping with it. No. You go to any shop. And so if I have only Liberian dollars, the rate is certainly higher. If I have the US dollars, I just pay my things in US dollars and I go. And that is affecting the economy. It's affecting the development of the people because of the conflict. And women are the ones who earn less in any case, because with the conflict, education has come to a standstill. And so the few men who had a bit of education, who survived the conflict, are the ones who are going to be the directors in offices. And as directors, they earn the money. What happens to the poorer woman who doesn't have any income? At a point in the police service of Liberia, they couldn't find women because most of them are illiterates. And the men who were even there, the level of education for them to be occupying certain positions was nothing to write home about. And so there had to be an affirmative action to say, look, if a woman has basic primary education, allow her into the police service. That's just an example. And it cut across all the departments within the government systems or structures. And so conflict is not something we should look out for. And if it happens, everybody is affected and everybody should be considered in terms of negotiations for peace. Women's voices are not heard. Men are the ones sitting around the table.
Is it because generally there is some level of peace and that we don't have too many, Syria, you look at Syria, we don't have anything like aeroplanes flying and bombing, Palestine, Israel. We don't have that sort of conflict here. Could it be why, we are a bit silent on what you're demanding?
Well, as I said earlier, we have had conflict, and we still have conflicts in our communities. You see, we haven't had it at the level of Liberia or Sierra Leone or Syria, as we hear. But Ghana is not as peaceful as we think. For me, look, recently, the project I'm working on, I was trying to find out where there are conflicts. And I got to know that very, very, very rural communities, that I know of. I see people around. I come from Nandom in the Upper West region. And there are communities within Nandom where they had not attended each other's funerals for over a decade because there is a land dispute. The youth have been stabbing each other, and families just treat it like, well, that's their village. They just resolve the issue. Do you think that one day, if some, excuse me to say, mad politician from one of the communities goes with arms to give to the youth in his community to start fighting, killing, and then this other community, his people hear of it, the elites or the richer ones also buy arms, are we not going to have a national conflict? Because that's how it starts. Very, very, very small things. And I keep referring to the Liberian conflict when I'm talking about conflicts. And for me, I don't downplay on the magnitude of the conflict. The conflicts in the area that I'm describing are just about boundaries of who is farming into my boundary. But that can lead to a whole national conflict because you have boundaries that are inter-ethnic. So you have two ethnic groups that are sharing boundaries. And so if one ethnic group hears that the other ethnic group is attacking, all over the country, won't we start attacking each other wherever we see each other? If Akans are attacking Fantis, won't any Fanti decide to revenge? We'll have a national conflict. But we are not interested in ensuring that people do the right thing. And unfortunately, it's coming to light that all these conflicts are ignited by the so-called educated, enlightened, informed people who should be able to tell their communities, please, conflict is bad. They are the ones igniting the conflict.
Because I was bringing to my question with, modern day and very divisive politics. Everything has to be NPP, everything has to be NDC, and every time we are nearing towards election, everybody's on tenterhooks. I wonder how that conflict affects women, if it does.
Very much. One, people who are in leadership are there through the wrong means and with the wrong reasons, and so corruption is bred, mismanagement, misallocation of resources. At the end of the day, the women who earn fewer pennies or pesewas than the men are the ones who are struggling. You have widows, you have single mothers whose children also have to come to University of Ghana, whose children have to go to Central University, and they pay the same fees. There's no provision in our constitution or any legal instrument which says that when a widow doesn't have money, her child should pay only 25% of the school fees. And yet we have politicians, we have leaders, we have directors who are dictating how that widow lives because of his position of power. And so elections come and everybody is struggling, but those who are vulnerable become more and more vulnerable. And so if already women are the poorer in the community, they even get poorer and poorer.
I'll take my last break, and when we come back, we look at what they are demanding. That the government must practice democracy, inspire trust, promote openness, and adhere to accountability, rule of law, transparency, and respect the limits of its power, and reach an adequate a degree of consensus on key national issues, and many more. Stay tuned. Women, Conflict and Peace, and I am talking with Rosalind, well, I'm being educated by Rosalind Obeng Ofori with regards to the effect of what women go through when there is no peace, either at home, in the nation, anywhere. And some of the demands that they want from their constitution is that The government must practice democracy, inspire trust, promote openness, and adhere to accountability, rule of law, transparency, and respect the limits of its power, and reach an adequate degree of consensuousness on key national issues. Over to you, Rosalind.
Thank you. You see, these demands, I think every Ghanaian should applaud the women for making these demands. We are asking for the government to inspire trust in us. As we sit here as a Ghanaian, whether you are a woman or a man, do you think you adequately trust that the government is doing what you want?
No.
And why is it so? Because our democracy is only by voting. When people say Ghana is democratic, I laugh. Because what is democracy? Full participation of everybody.
Inclusiveness.
Inclusiveness. Do we have it? We don't. If you have less than 10% of women in politics and decision-making structures, when they actually are more than the people who are ruling them, then where is the democracy? Because then it means that women's voices are not adequately heard, so we can't be talking of democracy. Women are not adequately represented, so we are not talking about democracy. Women's needs are not met, resources are not allocated equally and equitably, so we are not democratic. We should say Ghana has succeeded in going through elections peacefully, even though that peace is in quotes, because for me, where there's no justice, there's no peace. And so when somebody is not happy about what has happened and the person is brooding, there's still no peace, there's a conflict. And so depending on how much the person can contain the conflict, when it bursts, the conflict there will be an explosion. And Ghana, we should see ourselves as a nation where we are sitting on a time bomb. And I'm not saying this because I want to see Ghana explode. But we should take precautions. We should not sit and allow the cliche that Ghanaians are peaceful, Ghanaians are hospitable, Ghanaians are accommodating, and yet we are drawing backwards and backwards and backwards with these cliches. Practically, how democratic are we? When we are taking decisions for people who are not considered, when we don't consult people and we give them needs that we think are the needs that they want, how democratic are we? Here we are, when somebody sits and decides to appoint a district chief executive for me, and I don't know, I know the persons I'm living with, I know who would have been my better district chief executive, and I have every right to have a say in who is appointed as my district chief executive. But as it is now, I don't have that right. It has become a political party right. Political party right. And so women are saying that the government should inspire trust by letting us know that the person I'm appointing is someone you can work with. He or she is somebody who cares for you. He or she is somebody who has you at heart. And the person is going to work with you to identify your needs. Don't let me sit and then I'm given a document which says, this is my medium-term development plan. Do you know what I want? Do you know what my community wants? But because this is your political party, I don't belong to it, so I'm out of it. And yet in your manifesto, in your campaign, you are coming to help me to live a better life. And yet my better life, you don't even know what it is.
So that's a fair demand. Let's go to the next one. That all relevant constitutional bodies and civil society should work to improve the culture of peace as a key condition for promoting human security and social justice.
Yes. Referring to my previous statement that our constitution should make it say that anybody who is caught igniting conflict should also be dealt with. It's criminal for you to go and bribe somebody to go and fight another community. So if we have systems in place that check and sanction and punish those who are igniting conflict, we would have been working towards a peaceful environment. Elections are coming. For how many years? We've always had post-election evaluations, recommendations are made. How many of them have been implemented? Elections will come and go, and those recommendations will not be implemented. So do you think that one day we are not going to have a conflict?
Let us hope not. The third one is that the government must minimize conflict through the judicious and equitable allocation of resources to regions and districts.
Yeah. Look at positions even held nationally. And it can be any political party. Today NDC is in government. Tomorrow it could be MPP. Where would the ministers come from? Are you looking now for people who are technically competent? Or you are looking at sycophants? You are looking at foot soldiers who went from house to house distributing matches for you to get the vote. And then you put a square peg in a round hole to come and lead me. So where are we going to go? So we need to look at the issue of, for me, I think that this winner takes all thing. Maybe I don't get it, but I think it is something Ghanaians should debate very, 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 very critically. You find that anytime a regime comes to power, a lot of chief directors are sent off. Some chief directors are technically good. They may belong to a political party, but their technical expertise is not used just for the political party. It's used for the benefit of the whole country. So why do you have to sack that person? Certain positions, I think, in this country should be made technical positions and should have nothing to do with the political party. And I think we should have a legislation where any government that comes to power must continue with wherever the previous government left off.
And I agree with you very much. Folks, that's all time will allow us. I've been talking to Rosalind Obingofori, West Africa Program Manager for Purdue Peace Project. And we're talking about women in conflict and peace. And obviously, the more peaceful the women are in the country, the more peace of mind the men will get.
Certainly.
And tomorrow we'll be back to do it all over again. And our personality on Friday is Mike Egan. You don't want to miss that. He has a story and a half. Even though we didn't finish telling his story, you just don't want to miss tomorrow's personality profile. Stay tuned.